Good morning, and welcome back to Rise and Thrive with Dr. J. Nicole, where we are rising in faith and thriving in purpose. Today's episode is one that's deeply personal, and we're going to be talking about grief. Some of you may know because I posted on social that I lost my mom on December 17th. She lost the battle with cancer. It was in her lungs and spread to her brain. And I'm typically like the strong friend that's checking in on everyone else. And so this is obviously a season where a lot of people are reaching out to me and asking me what I need. And so it was very important for me to take a pause and to think about what I do need. And having experienced significant loss and grief in my history, there's a lot of things that I did not do well or do properly or healthily. And I'm determined to not do that this time around and to do it as healthily as I can and to practice what I promote with the people that I'm so blessed to support as therapist, friend, and any other capacities that people are in my life. And so in doing that, coming up with my list, the light bulb went on and said, well, Jeannie, other people need this too. Other people, if they're not the strong friend, they're friends to the strong friend. This episode is going to be helpful whether you are the strong friend or supporting one, right? And anyone that listens, you leave with a better understanding of grief, support, and just also like what healing can really look like. All of us love someone who has or will experience grief. And it's going to be really important to know how to help them or also sometimes they need to know how to help us when we're going through that season because we don't always know how to grieve is one of those things that people do not talk about. And grief has a way of exposing gaps in what we believe and what we've been taught strength looks like, healing, faith, and even support. Many of us are taught how to survive, but not how to be held, not how to receive that support and that goodness without it being experienced as weakness. We've also been taught how to show up for others. So today we're going to slow things down. We're going to talk about why grief can feel so disoriented, why the strong friend often goes unseen in grief, what grief actually looks like beneath the surface, and how attachment patterns shape how we ask for and or avoid help during grief, what healthy support really looks like, and how faith can hold grief without rushing it. Okay. So, my hope is that by the end of this episode, you feel less confused about what you're feeling or experiencing, that you're more compassionate with yourself and others. So, let's begin. One of the first things I want to normalize is grief doesn't just affect your emotions, it affects your capacity. And capacity, this is your ability to think clearly, to regulate your emotions, make decisions, and even carry out daily tasks. And grief reduces capacity often, suddenly, and without warning. That's why people who are grieving often say things like, I don't feel like myself. I think I'm okay. Everything feels harder than it should, right? This is not personal failure, but a biological response. So, what happens with grief is that it activates your nervous system the same way other major stressors do, except grief doesn't resolve as quickly. Your body is adjusting to a world that no longer looks or feels the same. So, that's why logic doesn't fix grief and why staying busy does not heal it. Busyness can also distract you, but it doesn't help your nervous system to integrate the loss. Your body needs time, and your mind, it needs meaning, and your spirit needs space. So let's talk about the strong friend. The strong friend, they're reliable, emotionally regulated, high functioning, responsible, the one that others lean on. And because of that, people often assume, oh, they'll be fine. Oh, they don't need any as much. They don't need as much. They're handling it like, they got it, right? You'll hear those types of things. But strength can become camouflage, and it's very easy to hide behind. The strong friend is often grieving quietly. They'll still show up, they'll still get dressed, they'll still go to work, they still function. And because they don't look like what they're going through, their grief can go unnoticed. Here's something important to understand: grief doesn't always look like falling apart. Sometimes it looks like holding everything together with effort. The strong friend often doesn't ask for help, not because they don't need it, but because they've learned early that needing help wasn't safe, it wasn't available, or reliable. And grief challenges this belief. One reason grief feels heavier than expected is because it rarely arrives alone. There's usually a primary loss. So that would look like the person, the relationship, the role, if it was like a job of some sort, and the actual reality. Your reality changes when there's a primary loss, but then it's attached to secondary losses. And so that can look like a loss of routine, a loss of safety, loss of identity, loss of future expectation, plans that you made, a loss of belonging or emotional anchoring. So let me give you an example. When a parent dies, the primary loss is a person. So in my case, right, like that would be my mother. The secondary loss can include the loss of guidance. Like my mom, she would always send Bible scriptures, right? So I don't get those on my phone anymore. And really, it stopped as the cancer progressed, right? So it's a loss of family structure or the feeling of having someone in your corner. Like, have you ever had that experience where you went to pick up the phone to call somebody and you have to remember they're no longer here? Like, I can no longer call them, right? So that's it. Okay. And like, or even for instance, if a marriage ends, the primary loss is the relationship. Secondary losses may look like loss of community, loss of financial stability, or loss of the version of yourself that existed in the role and the plans and the expectations that were attached to that. So when people try to move on too quickly, they often address the primary loss, but then they ignore the secondary ones. And acknowledging unacknowledged losses don't disappear, they wait. And that waiting is often what people experience as lingering grief, confusion, emotional heaviness. And there are so many other ways in which it can show up. So, we're going to talk a little bit about unhealthy grief. Unhealthy grief, right? So, this is the grief in the waiting that's buried, that maybe has grown roots that we've put off, and it often will show up in an unhealthy way. And so when people think of unhealthy grief, they often imagine someone that's just visibly falling apart. But unhealthy grief can look very functional. It can look like overworking. How many people do you know things start going wrong in their life? They throw themselves into work or they throw themselves into school. It can look like over functioning. So they're always doing something. They're moving around the house. They got to clean up. They're worried about everyone else's business. They're also avoiding stillness and using distractions to outrun emotions. And there's all sorts of distractions that we can get into, okay? That can look like jumping into a relationship. It can look like drinking. It can look like sex. It can look like gambling. It can look like overeating, sleeping too much. It's like busy, okay? Like just doing a lot. Other ways that unhealthy grief can look, it can look like judging yourself for still hurting because it's been enough time. I shouldn't feel this way anymore, is what I've heard people say before, right? Like grief takes as long as it takes. And, it's not a good feeling. And a lot of times we just want to rush through it and be over it when really we have to allow ourselves to actually process it, to feel it, to release it. I'm not saying wallow in it, but we have to let it do what it needs to do. And we put a lot of effort into running from it. It can also look like, in terms of unhealthy grief, it looks like pretending you're fine because others expect you to be. Now, this is a hard one, right? Because you're wearing almost like a double mask at that point. And unhealthy grief, we have to understand it's not about feeling too much as it is about not allowing yourself to feel at all. And here's a simple truth I want to share. And you better understand it. Everything is a seed, okay? So anything buried alive will grow. And so that seed of suppressed grief, it sprouts. And over time, it can grow into anxiety, numbness, depression, compulsive behaviors, or, because it's not uncommon for folks to have a combination of these, spiritual disconnection. Healing isn't about staying in grief forever. It's about allowing grief to move, allowing it to flow so that it doesn't harden, or going back to that seed reference, so that it does not sprout, grow, bear fruit, and plant roots. It's a lot harder to pull that back up once it becomes deeply rooted. And for some people, I've seen it where grief has completely changed the way that they live their life. It's had an impact on their personality because they need to do the work. It doesn't mean that it can't be undone. There's work that has to be done. Things have to be dug up and unearthed if you allow it to be buried. So, how do you feel without falling apart? We're going to get into that a little bit now, right? So, there is a difference between feeling grief and being consumed by it. So, to feel the grief, this means naming what hurts, and that's going to look different from day to day. Trust me, I know. So, we have to name it, right? And then allowing the emotions to move. So that can look like any number of things. It can look like you just need to be still. You might feel random crying. If you feel the urge to like numb, that's an indicator that your grief is trying to tell you something and you're avoiding. Okay. Something that's so important that I don't think a lot of us do enough of is offering self compassion. We have the tenderness, the grace we hold space for and care for everyone else. And we don't even give ourselves a fraction of that. So self compassion looks like each day checking in to see what do you have capacity for that day. So someone shared with me like each day using the spoon method, right? So say your best maximum capacity is 8 spoons, okay? But we know every single day is not going to be an 8 spoon day, right? So what this would look like each day and sometimes throughout the day. But when you're starting your day, take a moment of silence and assess how you feel. How many spoons are present? Is it 6? Is it 3? Is it 1? Whatever your number is. And then I want you to commit to, if it's a 6 spoon day, we're going to do 6 spoon things. So that does not mean trying to do things that require an 8, because you know what's going to happen? You're not going to be able to do it because remember, grief impacts your capacity. So you're looking to do something that you don't have the energy, the capacity, the focus, whatever is required to do that day. And then you're going to feel bad about yourself because you're expecting you to operate at your highest capacity. So there's a lack of acceptance in the moment. It doesn't mean that you're a complete failure and that you can't do it anymore. It's just that that day, it's a 6 spoon day. So we're going to conquer this 6 spoon day. And guess what? You accumulate positives in the process because you're able to get things done. So you feel good about yourself. And then you don't feel like the whole day is a wash. And you might start out your day. So say you start out with a 6. And then, like on a day like today, it drops down to 4. Adjust your day accordingly. We have been programmed and conditioned to just push through. We don't have to do that. But getting back on topic, helping you understand what being consumed by grief might mean and what it may look like, okay? So, this looks like letting it define your entire identity. So, for some people, they say things like, I'll never be the same again. I'm never going to hurt. I'll never let go, or my heart is going to be forever broken. You hear these things, and I don't think individuals recognize what they're saying. They're saying, I'm going to always hurt. So then at that moment, they're choosing to hold on. And guess what? That's going to change you. And that seeps into your identity. Another way that it looks like to be consumed by grief is to lose all structure. And I don't mean, taking a few days. It means like your complete life falls apart. You don't know up from down. You're spinning. Okay. And that could also be coupled with feeling hopeless or stuck. And so, again, I want to reiterate the goal is not to resist grief and is not to drown in it either. The goal is to find a middle path so you can feel deeply but remain whole. And that's why structure is important and going about your day and doing as many regular things as possible. Also, acknowledging that there are days where you just don't have it. Be honest with yourself. Make it a day where you catch up on some of those shows you've been wanting to binge for a while, but just haven't had time to. It's okay to do that sometimes. But when that turns into multiple days and weeks, and for some people, even months, that's where it can get dangerous. So give yourself room, but structure is important. Support absolutely helps. Stop trying to be God's strongest soldier. He didn't ask you to do that. You're doing that because you're not giving it to him. And then you'd be like, God, why did I get the strongest soldier package this year? Because you picked it up. Give it to God. Give it to God. You have to surrender it. You can't get through this on your own. God will send you people. There are people who love and care about you very much. And as I shared earlier, I came up with a list of ways that people can support me. And I'll be honest, in prior seasons of my life where I experienced grief, I didn't tell people, or I said something after the fact. Like it meant a lot to me that they didn't take my withdrawing, my isolation personally. And I acknowledge that, I didn't have the capacity, but I didn't have the language at that time to tell them that. And this time around, I said, I'm not doing that. So I came up with a list and I'm letting people do what they feel comfortable with. And I made sure that I was clear with them and saying, it's not an expectation that you do anything as much as you show up with what capacity you have to support me. Because just because my world is topsy turvy right now with the loss of a mother, it doesn't mean that they have to miraculously have nothing going on and run to my side. Like that's not how that works at all. So this is where, you can do loose planning. So that was a version of planning me saying, hey, these are what my needs are. Help where you can, and I'm not going to take it personally. And we also have to remember this is not about control, but it's about compassion. Compassion for yourself as you're going through this, compassion for others while they're supporting you. Okay. So I said I was going to talk a little bit about attachment and how this shows up in grief because this is critically important. Okay. So attachment is basically how we show up in our relationships. And it's first shaped like your blueprint for your attachment. Um, it shows up in from birth to 18 months, the initial blueprint. And this is the experience that you have with their caregivers and how responsive they are or the lack thereof of being responsive to your needs or inconsistency to your needs during that birth to 18-month period. And so you adjust as a result of that. And it continues on throughout your life, right? Um, and so And actually, go back and watch the attachment episode with Brittany Livingston. We get into it a little bit more there if you want more. So that I'm not redoing the episode essentially, but I do want to equip you with a few things. So basically, your attachment style looks at um, avoidance and anxiety. We all experience a level of avoidance and anxiety in every single one of our relationships. And depending upon how much anxiety and avoidance you experience, that determines your attachment style. And it can change from season to season of your life and the healing that you invest in. So that means you'll fall into the category of secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant, like dismissive avoidant, or disorganized. And I know the labels don't sound that great, but this was what they, label them based on the behaviors exhibited by individuals with these. And so, as you can guess, anxious attachment means they're highly anxious, avoidant, they're going to withdraw. And the disorganized, just to be clear, that's a combination of the avoidance and heightened anxiety. So a person can be really close and then they'll suddenly pull away. So that's why it's called disorganized because you don't know what to expect. All right. So, not labeling anybody, just giving you groundwork so that you can hear it and receive it and kind of understand it to give you context. So, some people can cope with grief, like I said, by pulling away. It also can look like minimizing your needs, avoiding vulnerability. Others might cope by seeking reassurance, wanting closeness, feeling distress when support feels inconsistent. And neither response is wrong. The patterns are just shaped by attachment and by how we learn to seek comfort when we hurt. Grief tends to intensify whatever pattern already exists. And the work is not to judge your pattern, it's to be curious with it, it's to understand it. So you can choose support that actually helps. We don't want this to go and become worse, right? We don't want your relationships to fracture as a result of this. So, if you love someone who's grieving, especially the strong friend, here's what helps. I want you to make specific offers rather than vague ones. So, let me give you an example. You can say, I'll bring you dinner on Tuesday instead of let me know if you need anything. Yes, it's an open call, but sometimes individuals are so consumed with emotions, they can't even think straight. They may not even have an appetite. You also want to do some consistent check-ins without pressure, right? So it can be like, "Hey, thinking of you. How are you feeling today?" Those sorts of things. And it does not require a response. And you're okay that and you send this without the expectation of a response. And if you get one, fantastic, right? But sometimes people don't have the capacity, or it may take them a little bit longer to respond than it normally would. Their phones may be on silent because they don't want to communicate with anyone. They don't have it to offer to. Now, this next one can be a little difficult. You have to be present without fixing. Sometimes they just need a loving presence to not feel like you are alone, to just be there, watch the movie so they don't feel like they have to entertain you. They don't have to host. They don't have to cook. They don't have to talk. Just be there. It's so important. And here's the other thing, don't try to give advice unless they've asked. You can kind of keep those silver linings for now, right? Because this is in the beginning. They just need steadiness. Meet them where they are. And you might misstep sometimes, right? Like you want them to feel better. It's hard to see people that you love go through things. So it's going to be important to respect boundaries. So if you do something well intentioned and is not received well, respect that. Don't take it personally. And also know that help doesn't mean unlimited access. So that doesn't mean that you have to do everything or try to become everything for them because then you get worn out and burnt out in the process. Now, you can be curious with them and ask them about their feelings. And if they have the capacity to speak and share, they'll do it. And if not, okay. Now, if you are the strong friend, receiving help does not erase your strength, it expands it. Receive it. Communicate your needs, acknowledge your limits, share them appropriately. And if you're not sure what that is, take some time to think about it. And this is a great time to get into therapy, pick up some healthy habits like journaling so that you are expressing, because I recognize not everyone has access to therapy or to be able to go or can afford it for whatever reasons. That doesn't mean that you can't still be supported. Now, for people of faith, grief can really feel confusing, right? Because you believe in God and we believe that God is good, and yet and still we feel devastated. Know that you can trust God. You can go to God, even if you're angry, because you might be mad at God, like, God, why did you take them from me? Why are you allowing this to happen? You might feel disoriented. You might feel all sorts of things that are not pleasant. That does not change the character of God. And scripture makes room for this. This is known as lament. And you see this a lot in the Old Testament. When I was going through the Bible this past year, I noticed how when they experience loss and grief, the Bible would describe them as like tearing their clothing and crying out and falling to the ground. Like it's very dramatic the way that they express. But I think the beauty in that is that they weren't holding it. They let it out. They cried out. They hollered, they like the energy was expelled, right? They released it. And know that lamenting is not the absence of faith. It's faith spoken and experienced and felt honestly. Grief does not mean that you've lost God. It means that you are a human in a broken world. We're all going to experience grief. We all have. And all too often we think it's just about death. It happens in other ways. There's smaller disappointments, and we experience grief with them as well. And I want to remind you faith does not require pretending. It invites the presence of God, the Holy Spirit. God is near to the brokenhearted. God is waiting for you to surrender. God wants you to lean on Him. So I want you to consider that this season of grief is actually an invitation from God. And the question is, are you going to accept the invitation? God will heal you in a way that no man or no thing in this earth can. Those are only temporary fixes. And you'll continue to look for the next thing to make you feel better because it only lasts for so long. You're chasing those hits of dopamine and oxytocin and endorphins when all of those are good. But God's presence is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if you take nothing else from this episode, know this: grief is not a problem to solve, it's a process to honor. And you're not grieving wrong, you're not grieving weak, and you are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be. And every moment of hurt, of weakness, is an invitation to heal and to pull closer to God. And if you are the strong friend, you are allowed to be held. You're allowed to be cared for. You are allowed to receive. And healing does not mean forgetting what mattered or who mattered. It means learning how to carry it with care. So I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs it. leave comments down below and let me know what parts of this are helpful or what are some ways that you've seen people grieve healthily or how you've done it. And as always, keep rising in faith and thriving in purpose. I'll see you next time. Thank you for joining.